Raleigh Murch, super excited to have you here. My understanding is that you have recently published a blog about agents, secret agents, CIA agents, something with an agent involved, and I'm super curious to know what it is.
Yeah, I think it was affectionately titled "The Nuclear Rise of the AI Agent."
Mm.
It's a bit of a nerd fest, but I'll tell you for those that are following generative AI, have you heard the term generative AI? It's
I'm familiar with it, but I think if anyone who's watching this, if they're not familiar with it, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. So AI's been around for a long time. Artificial intelligence been around. I'm thinking way back to 1960s, there's AI has been around for a while. It's the propensity to automate, and so we had early macros where we were just automating basic thoughts and or basic processes, and then it starts to transition more to more complex process automation activities. And so basically what's happened is it's been around for a long time. And now we've got, actually get a drink.
Generative AI, that agua in your boca, eh?
Sí, señor. Por favor, manténganse alejados.
Wow.
Yeah, do you know? So side note, my grandmother worked at Disney World, and she worked there for 25 years. And retired there. And so every summer, we would go down to my grandma, spend a month or so with my grandmother, and we'd get into Disney World for free.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went so many times, I actually got used to the tram announcement where they say in Spanish, "Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas."
Wow.
You know what that means? Please stand clear of the doors. So.
I'll give you mine as a rebuttal. So mine is Puedo ir al baño. Profesor, puedo ir al baño, por favor? Teacher, may I please go to the bathroom? I got really good at that when in middle school.
I bet that one got worn out, right?
Yeah. I think there was a point a couple months into the school where she said, "You're not allowed to go to the bathroom anymore."
In any language. So anyway, so what is generative AI? So generative AI basically is the ability to generate net new material from an existing corpus of data, from existing material. So you take existing material, the text in a book, and you can generate new information based on the text in that book, for example. So if you can imagine, take your favorite book and imagine that's all you know. And from that data, you can then summarize what the book is about. You can write new material using all the lexicon or all the, the words that you've just learned from that book. You can write poetry from the text that's in that book. And so then now imagine you take that book and you ingest the entire internet. So now with the ability to generate, with the ability to predict the next word, the ability to predict the next sequence of words, the next hundreds of pages of words, you really start to get really creative with how you think about creating net new material. And so at its core, generative AI is the ability to generate new material from existing. So that takes the place, that manifests itself in so many different modes, different modalities. There's, you've got all these image programs where you can take text and you can create new images from text. You can Chat GPT, you ask something, you're gonna get a number of different responses back based on the nature of your ask. And so when you think about the emerging state of generative AI, it really comes down to a lot of different patterns. So it's like, how do you practice AI? Well, you practice AI in through different patterns that are available in the market, different design patterns. And so as a technologist, I'm always trying to find and stay in tune with the most emerging design pattern of how to use it. So the way this sort of has worked is it first started off as kind of a request response experience. That's the one most people are sort of used to, which is Chat GPT, plan my next vacation. I'm going to Miami and I want to hit these 3 things. So I want you to plan an itinerary for me that, that's most convenient and, hits all the hot spots and the best restaurants and all those sorts of things. So you're requesting something and you're getting a response back from that request. That's the most common basic pattern for generative AI. You request something, you get something back. So then it starts to get really interesting where kind of the next kind of step up in technology was something called, you'll hear it referred to as the RAG pattern.
Mm-hmm.
RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. But what that ultimately is the ability to go in and retrieve a different data set and do generative AI on that data set. So some people have said, look, I know GPT-4o and all these other, it's trained on all the internet data and all. I don't want any of that. I want my sensitive corporate data over here. I want just this small, this small body of data to work. I don't need all that other stuff, right? So they came up with a retrieval augmented generation pattern, which just said basically, hey, go get a certain subset of data, and I want to make sure that I'm going to make a request about the data that I provide, and we're going to pass it into the model to kind of do what it does from a summary and predicting, the next word and the intent of the intent of the question to respond back. So now we can talk to our data. That's pretty interesting. That's sort of the next step change in patterns. So then the kind of the most emerging pattern from that is, well, I can talk to it. I can talk to my data. It gives me answers back, but that's not enough. I want to be able to do something based on what we're talking about. So you detect a negative sentiment in my voice as I'm talking to a bot, and this bot is trained on all my, knowledge base for my company. I now want you to take action. And so now we're starting to equip these models with tools. And so tools now allow you to go out to the internet and scan something, or go out into an internal API and call that thing, or make a call to an IVR to do an IVR transfer or whatever. So now these things can start to act. So, let me summarize real quick. Request response. I just want to ask you based on what you're already trained on. That's the classic GPT experience. There's, okay, that's cool. I want to be able to talk with specific data sets. That's the RAG pattern. The next step change is tools. Now I want to talk with data, but I want to go do something with that data. So now you equip it with tools. You basically say, hey, I've got this API that's available to you, LLM, and here's what this does. This transfers a user to a IVR. So if you detect something's not right with this conversation.
When you say IVR, just in case people aren't familiar with that acronym, what's that?
So that's interactive voice response. So you imagine you're calling into a system and press 1 for this, press 2 for that, right? So you're going through the prompts, and based on what you press, it transfers you, right?
Yeah, I love talking to those automated people all day.
Gosh, don't we all?
The callback. The allow me to hang up and then call me back when you're ready for me, it was probably one of the greatest features as part of that particular flow ever.
100. And now that I'm an iPhone user, when I was a Pixel user for many years, Android user for many years, and they had a feature, despite what the IVR offers, you can have it try a number, and it just keeps, if you're on hold or whatever, and then you can just sort of hang up, and it will alert you when someone picks up. So you get in that song, or you see the it plays that you'd hear people dance.
Maybe I'll put it on so that people know which one we're talking about. But it's such a good song.
Yeah. I've seen a couple of Instagrams where people are dancing to that song. It's burned into my memory. And so what's interesting is that you can have this hold, and then you just put your phone down, and then when it gets someone answers, it'll call you back, and you can engage.
You're the green text in the thread, and that's unforgivable. So I'm glad you joined the light side, I would say.
Yeah, I know the pain now on the other side.
Yes,
it's so my whole family now they're all iPhone users, and we're airdropping stuff. I'm 4K videos. So I'm on the
nice.
I have made the return.
We digressed a little bit there, but back to we defined IVR.
Yeah. So IVR. So IVR is an example in the stack. Again, request response. I just want to ask questions of material. Okay, yeah. So that only goes so far. Now I want to ask specific data. I want to ask questions of specific data. That's the next step. Third step, tools. So now I want to enable this transaction, this experience with tools. So I give it an API call. A sample API call could be a request to an IVR. So basically, all you do is you equip the LLM with a document with a specification. It's called like an API specification that says, "I'm going to give you this API," and you give it a URL, and you describe it and say, "This API is responsible for transferring to a human," right? And so now the LM says, now I know how to transfer to a human. And so in the prompt instructions, the text that you use to tell it kind of what to do, you can say, if you detect negative sentiment as part of this interaction, I want you to transfer to a human. So okay, yeah, I think I know how to. It otherwise wouldn't know, right? How to transfer to human? I don't know how.
I think the only other signal for that is the person pressing 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, opera over and over and over again. That's always been my move.
Yes.
But to get ahead of that,
Yeah.
and to hear in my voice that I'm annoyed or struggling or upset, and to be able to just immediately trigger that call,
yes,
that's huge.
It's huge. And sidebar, within custom. So ChatGPT has the free version. They have the premium tier. The premium tier, that was the best $20 since the $20 AOL CD that used to hit the mailbox and it would give you internet. Like this, that was a powerful premium feature because what it would enable you to do is you could build little prototypes like that. These advanced prototypes in a minute. Take an hour and you could develop something like this, and then you start cussing to it. You say, I hate bots. This is stupid. Oh, I detect a negative sentiment. Let me transfer, and it will simulate that whole experience so you know that something's working as part of a corporate pitch. Like the art of the possible is there. You can demo it. So it gave you a little workbench platform that you could use. With as part of your pre-sale cycle. So anyway, back to the chain here. So you've got tools, and then at the kind of the final stage, and I think where we are at current time is what we're calling, or what the industry is calling, agents. And agents are all of the above. It allows request response. It allows custom data. It allows tool use, but it has its own cognitive ability to think on its own, which is pretty powerful. So you imagine a business process, like in practice, you have a business process. You can simulate a role like a chat agent, like a agent that sits there and actually takes calls. I mean, I'm using agent in different terms. I need to differentiate. So you have someone who's there fielding calls on behalf of service support. Well, there's a number of things they do in their day-to-day life. They're gonna be conversational with the customer. They're gonna detect negative sentiment, take certain actions based on the state of the discussion or the complexity of the discussion. They're gonna take certain actions. They may do a follow-up based on certain things that are required. You can take that entire business process and encapsulate that as a agent. And that agent just lives on its own. It's not and it's kind of unpredictable. So you have to create a feedback loop. So you're checking on it, making sure it's responding correctly based on inputs, but it's fully autonomous. It's not coded. So people say, well, you could code that, but if you're coding something and you're writing software, you have to tell it every path. If someone does this, then I need you to explicitly do that. But with agents, you give it some prompting, some training, some data, and it figures out what it needs to do and sort of automatically does that. And then again, you have to keep checking on it to make sure that, it's not making decisions and then learning from those decisions that,
It's interesting hearing you talk about it like that because, part of my brain goes, it's like a sentient being. And like a sentient being, you're like, you got to check on them and do like performance evaluation and make sure that, they're doing their job correctly. You're still creating a ton of efficiency and automating a ton of process. So that's good news. But it's like I love in some of these examples where it's technology is a solution, but you still have what I would call like human problems, which in this example, it's like, yeah, I gotta just check in on my team and make sure that they're kind of doing everything correctly and they're not coming up with new ideas that are counter to perhaps how we want to operate in this particular function of whatever business you're doing. But that I was kind of giggling to myself over here, like, yeah, you got to check on them just like everyone else.
You absolutely do, and that's where the realities of governance. People aren't just saying governance just to tip the hat and get on to the next. Oh, we're doing governance. We get the seal of approval, and we move forward. Governance really is at the architectural level the ability. I mean, you got to check in on these things, and so you're, from a pattern perspective, as a solutions architect, you're putting in quality subsystems that intermittently might ask your agent a question and validate how it's reacting in that moment, validating that it's doing the right thing in that moment so that it doesn't go astray. And so you have these kind of pings, these health checks, once a day to say, okay, the agent is acting responsibly, everything's working appropriately as it should. And so that's like these checks are part of a solution to ensure you've got good governance. And so it's a very important step.
I know that the technology industry has not always been the best at branding, but I do think that the word agent there's an association I think people have with that word, and I mean, even like using this like call center example of like, yeah, it's an agent, but that it's a person who is dealing with a situation, and now this is a technology function that's dealing with a situation, a customer service related, example. But I imagine agent means a lot of different things, not just in the call center kind of escalation point type use case. So maybe just for the sake of myself and others who maybe hear the word agent have an association with that, what are some other ways to think about the way an agent can function or add value to an organization?
Yeah. So at the high level, you're really just thinking about any business process and someone that would need to make decisions and take action as part of a business process. But I'll be less abstract and say, imagine, you've got you're looking at a live feed or you're looking at a brand and you want to control hate speech. So you could have a hate speech, and I talk a little bit about that in the blog post, like a hate speech agent that is tasked with monitoring channels, streams, whatever, and trying to extract out, the speech and the tone and how are other people talking about this brand and other, kind of members within, and what is the ultimate message from this brand. And so you can watch for certain, themes or phrases that might be indicative of hate speech, but it doesn't have to be a static list, right? It could be dynamic, a dynamic API that's going out and looking at, I don't know if there's a symposium or something out there where there's, standards around hate speech that you can actually have the agent say, go out and reference this body of knowledge first before you're making a decision. It doesn't have to be stale. It doesn't have to be updated every night or part of a database. It just knows, okay, I'm going to get just like a real person might go out and just check standards. You can have this agent say, go out and check standards as you're thinking about how you're monitoring, this brand or, the puts and takes for hate speech.
Yeah, now maybe agent was the right word, because some of the use cases that we're talking about, it's monitoring and then it's taking an action. So it's like, what's an agent do in the real world? Hey, here's a rule of law, in theory, that we are going to enforce, and we're going to be monitoring our community or our city or our country. We're going to be monitoring these behaviors that are contrary to the rule of law. And if we find them, we're going to address them and deploy an action or something to stop that particular event or behavior from happening. So I kind of take back what I said earlier. I was like, maybe agent, it's a little, it's got some, association, but maybe it is the right association, because it's like anything that you want, any action that you're trying to drive or prevent or mitigate against, there's a high probability that you can train an agent to go address that particular situation. Because that symposium example and like monitoring hate speech, I mean, that's got to be one of probably 100 million different examples that you can apply this technology to.
Yeah, no doubt. And once you sort of get it, once you understand the design pattern, and again, I think it's the most emergent one of the collection as we're building up to see what's next. Like there's so many uses. And then now there's this, you'll hear a term, they call it agentic workflows, which now we're talking about. And there's a popular framework out right now. There's many, but one that comes to mind, and it's really, the name is really appropriate. It's called Crew AI. And the reason why they use the term crew is it's a crew of agents. So you've got a crew around the table. You've got a crew on a team. Everybody on that team has a very specific role. One person does their role, and then they hand to someone else, and then they hand to someone else. And so now when you start to get to multi-agentic workflows, you're putting agents right next to each other and automating more and more of the workflow.
Wow.
This is where it gets powerful. And the interesting thing is, each one of those agents has a little slice of either a larger LLM. So think about like OpenAI. Either each one of these agents are interfacing with OpenAI, for example, and they have a very specific thing that they're thinking about or that they're tasked with, right? Or you have what's called SLMs now, small language models, which are more purpose built. Brains, smaller cognitive kind of, models that are built to support a particular workflow. And so each agent might have their own SLM associated, just like, we have our own set of instructions that we sort of follow, our learnings, the way we were raised and whatever. So too can LLM. So you can either each take a fraction, each talk to a single API, like an OpenAI API, to carry out an activity, or you could be more self-sufficient and have a small language model where you're focused on a particular and trained on a particular,
Wow.
set of outputs.
And I imagine there isn't like one way is better than the other. It just totally depends on the use case.
The use case.
Yeah, it always does.
Yeah.
That's that's kind of mind-bending a little bit. But it's surprisingly for me personally, one of the easier things to visualize in the last 10 years of all like abstract, we want to move to the cloud, and then we're going to take this and we're going to build a dashboard and analyze. And it just, now I'm just going, oh yeah, it's agents that have responsibilities, and then you can organize them into a team of agents to handle some type of, insert anything, any function that's trying to be accomplished at an organization or company, or it's possible, basically. You just have to build the team, train the team, and continue to monitor the team, just like humans.
You got it. Touchdown. Explain to me like I'm Chris has succeeded, because it's like that's it. Like that design pattern, once understood, is like, from a opportunity perspective, you get on the ground with the customer, you're talking to the customer about their business objectives, and you're listening for the business processes, and you're listening and say, to say, where can I get, where would be a good place to sort of automate these business processes? Is this a good place for an agent? Maybe it is. You don't want to use that. You don't want to use that everywhere, but we're a long way from pretty quickly just these little, these request response chatbots. And so really the blog post was just to tip the hat on saying, look, this is the cutting edge of emerging technology where we're at right now. And I won't say it happened yesterday. This is something that folks have been thinking about for, many months now. And there are lots of startups that offer, they like to package these agents as like personas. Here's the hate speech agent is a perfect one, because you can kind of encapsulate it all on its own. It detects hate speech. This is, go buy it or download it from my site. Every transaction will get, it's a fee, it's ready to use, and you just deploy it in your environment, ready to go. So it's, the more common it is, the more it's likely to be seen in the marketplace from many of these, vendors. And
you said earlier, the blog post, like a reason for it was a tipping of the hat. But is there is there a goal you'd have after someone reads this? Like, what's their big aha or takeaway?
Yeah, I think it's similar to how you saw that kind of light went off with you to say, oh my gosh, this like I get it. Like I wanted to provide a little state of the industry the way I see it, the way I think I followed it. And I did a little bit of comparison between just general system technology architecture, because once upon a time there were monolith architectures. Everybody just, imagine it was like the mega website that did everything, and everything's hard coded, and all the functions and all the data and everything was all part of one big application. And then as that kind of industry matured, they started to break out the data layer. Well, that sounds familiar. And then they started to break out these sort of ability to do external calls to other systems. So that sounds a lot like tools. And then they started to go into service-oriented architecture, where you had common function and features that existed on their own, and you could call other common features that existed on their own. So it's like, oh, okay, I think we've been here before. Now we're doing it with AI. So when it's sort of from a thought leadership perspective, say, I think we've seen this. I think we've seen this pattern. Here's the way I see it, kind of analogous to AI. And I believe this is sort of current state, is this multi-agentic workflow right now, at least current state, where it's kind of stable. It's mature enough to start to communicate. I think there's some other stuff that, Andrew Ng and some of those other thought leaders are experimenting with. But I think it's just to acknowledge that and have an understanding of how that might work in play. I even gave some healthcare examples, which leave those to the readers to kind of get through and try to understand. Because ultimately, what we want to do by the day is at the end of the day, is come in and help people accomplish some of this art of the possible. So.
Definitely. So where can folks that are interested go read this blog?
Yeah. So it's right now it's published on NTT's blog, NTT Data's blog website. So you can catch it there, and then I think there's some other. It's in the hands of marketing right now. I think they're going to put it out in some other campaigns, so you probably see it. We'll feature it on LinkedIn too. We'll push it out there, and then it'll be part of a larger kind of a global generative AI campaign, where I think it'll be published in a few other places. That's more to come there. So
did you have fun writing this blog?
It's awesome.
Do you anticipate more thought leadership coming in blog form after that experience?
I hope so. Yeah. A lot goes into this. So I hope, it takes a lot of revisions, because you think about kind of the critics. It's got to be technically accurate. It's got to be fun to read and all these sorts of things. And I didn't want to put something dry out and, illustrations.
And I poke at that because I obviously know that and I'm aware of that, but I don't know if everyone, because there's varying degrees of like, all right, I'm just going to throw something out there because it's, top of mind for me and it's out in the public domain. But sometimes when you're representing more than just your own IP and are kind of like a branded ambassador for a large $30 billion consulting organization, there tends to be a lot more intensive work that goes into that. So I was curious to see if that was a deterrent or it's just part of the process.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to a colleague of mine. We did a startup together long ago. He is a serial entrepreneur. So I told you about the wake kite. The wake kite thing that I did. It was before the wakeboarding. He invented the wake kite out of the long story short.
For anyone who's watching right now, I know this. So Raleigh was how would you describe a wakeboarding demo specialist, expert?
I guess they called it I was a team rider. I was a sponsored team rider. It's kind of exhibition rider. And so
you'd be like upside, you're like in the pictures where your head's here and your feet are up here and then the boat's all the way down here, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of experimentation that went into just product safety and trying to do this. So you imagine you invented something. This was the invention of something new, and it's for those, just to kind of draw a mental image. It's wakeboarding plus kiteboarding plus being towed behind a boat. So it gets real nasty. You think about lots of ropes and attachments and all those sorts of things that are happening there, and then there's this just kind of loft factor and angle of attack and things. And sometimes things would go awry, and the kites would shoot up really high, and you'd still be holding on, and you're not attached like you would be in a kiteboard. You're literally hanging on. So we went through the R&D phase of that to get it working, and then we did guerrilla marketing, where we would go out in the morning, rush hour traffic down in Oh, geez, the main river down in Portland. It escapes me right now. So we would ride through there, and then get the helicopters would come down. And we'd be riding, and it'd be cold, and whatever. Just try to draw media attention, in kind of Red Bull style to try to do things. And we would do things at boat shows, little hijack scenes, and run through there and do something where they have a pool. And so we did all these things just to try to drum up activity. And then what happened later, which was a nice win, and I know we've gone off tangent here, but it was a nice win, is it was acquired by HO Sports, which is the massive water sports conglomerate, which includes Hyperlight and Brian and some of the other big ones. And so after that happened, we did lots of official promos where we went to the Daytona 500 and we rode in the lake during the race, and lots of different kind of high profile stuff in like Abu Dhabi and some of those places. I didn't get to go to that, but some of the other riders did. So it was a fun experience. Nevertheless, I guess to bring us back around, the inventor of that and a few other things. He's got a number of patents. He actually helped me with the creative process to kind of get the writings out. So it wasn't just me sitting by myself and just kind of typing. We had kind of some interview processes where he was just trying to get the juices flowing, and I was in a similar format to this. And then the output was kind of a straw man, and then just kind of develop that to get to where. So I wanted to give a shout out to Dan Myers, who was
I love
integral
that.
to that.
Yeah, and maybe that, to anyone who's intimidated to write a blog post or put some thought leadership out there, perhaps a good place to start is find a confidant, someone that lights you up, that you have, that you are comfortable around, and just kind of start talking out loud about it to see what materializes. It sounds like that was helpful for you.
It was very helpful. And, just sort of get an idea. You imagine a process like this where you have your transcripts are being kind of audited to do, summaries and create certain things, because this is a very creative, free form process. So that leads to great outputs, I hope. Anyway.
Well, if we learned anything in this conversation, it's that maybe someday you'll be lucky enough to just be talking to an agent. And Agent Chris will be here, and he will be trained on all the ways to help moderate and elicit great input from his guests. And then I'll just be, sitting in my house somewhere doing a whole lot of nothing.
That's a great retirement plan. I could imagine that to be a highly utilized agent.
Exactly.
That would be good.
Well, I really enjoyed talking to you about this. I encourage everyone that's out there to obviously read the blog post that I just shouldn't even call it a post. I think it's a little bit more than that. But read Raleigh's blog about this topic of agents, and I'm sure that there'll be more interesting topics that we'll get into over the coming months, because this is a rapidly changing environment, and it's going at a pace that we barely can keep up with. But I appreciate you coming to talk about it today.
Yeah, sure thing, Chris. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I always enjoy this, and thanks to the podcast house. Thank you.